Look, as I just mentioned to Mark Latham, you'll recall that yesterday I referred to the outstanding 43-year-old Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who visited a school last week in Pasco County, Florida. And amongst other things, he talked about the things that Mark and I have talked about, keeping indoctrination and ideology out of the state's schools. But he put the medical board in its place concerning their efforts to include in the curriculum gender dysphoria care for minors, shoving that stuff in the curriculum. Now, as I said, we're talking about little school-aged children, allegedly uneasy and distressed about their gender, driven, no doubt, by relentless campaigns on social media. Governor DeSantis didn't beat around the bush. Children are being fed this stuff on social media platforms and in schools about gender dysphoria. Dysphoria, it's a silly word, it's a psychological expression for a state of unease or a general dissatisfaction, anxiety, I think. So biology being stood on its head and children being told, if not taught, that they're not defined by biology. You can be a boy if you want to be a boy, or a girl if you want to be a boy, a girl if you want to be a girl. And they're anxious about it. And kids' heads are being filled with this stuff. As Governor DeSantis said, a 14-year-old can't get a tattoo, but they're talking that they'll do mastectomies and things which are very problematic and irreversible. Said the governor, these are kids going through a growing time in their life. There are a lot of different factors, he said. Most of the dysphoria, anxiety, resolves itself by the time they become adults, so why would you disfigure a minor? Unquote. Well, this brings us to the extraordinary story of Ollie Davies. I mention his name because he has gone public and is doing an immense service to parents in the way in which they handle their children on this issue. Ollie made the decision at 26 to come out as a trans woman. He was suffering depression, anxiety and behavioural problems, as well as a crisis of self-identity. He admits he was lonely and self-hating and had no self-esteem. But he says that as a result of suggestions from others that he was trans, he began to believe it was true. Others started suggesting that he questioned his gender, and so he announced his decision to transition. In this modern world, he said the affirmation was immediate and intoxicating. And I quote Ollie, everyone I knew put trans people on a pedestal. It was fashionable. I knew it would be celebrated and promoted. At first, it was euphoric. I felt like coming out as trans was my coming home and the key to everything that was wrong in my life, unquote. But despite signing up enthusiastically for hormone therapy being a woman, he said, quote, being a woman never felt right. I came to realise it was a waste of time and a delusion. Well, a couple of years ago, while still living as a woman, Ollie Davies met a young lady and fell in love at first sight. She admits, quote, we were both fairly deep into the woke trans ideology, unquote. Ollie Davies, we're told, has now completed his transition back to being a man, and he and his partner Genevieve want to have a baby. But Ollie is now infertile from the effects of estrogen in his body. They're both devastated. The point is this, Ollie Davies now wants to publicly challenge what he describes as an activist-driven approach to diagnosing and treating gender anxiety, dysphoria. The number of children presenting at gender clinics has exploded in recent years. It's not clear whether their parents know about this. Legal actions are live in the UK from those who allege they've been harmed by affirmative care. In other words, go ahead with it. Ollie Davies says, quote, the gender-affirming approach in medicine, I think, he said, is a complete mistake. I've seen an enormous amount of anecdotal evidence, he said, including in my own life, that there are inadequate safeguards. I think that what has happened to me is just the thin edge of a massive iceberg, unquote. Ollie Davies says, quote, in my experience, people are inadequately educated about the risks when they initiate the process of transitioning or even not told about those risks at all. He said, it seems to me to just say, we must affirm, is utterly failing those people and actually causing harm, unquote. So what is at issue here? A very simple issue which admits, no doubt, of complicated responses. How do you care for young people raising gender concerns? It is time for some serious debate. Professor Ian Hickey from the University of Sydney's Brain and Mind Centre rightly says, and I quote, "This is really important, an incredibly significant health issue for individuals, and the ramifications are profound," unquote. Now, on the other hand, trans health bodies point to research that shows gender transition regret is extremely rare, and that people who detransition usually do so owing to discrimination. But Ollie Davies says, and I quote, "I think that in Australia there are hundreds of people like me who now regret it, and I think that soon there will be thousands." Ollie Davies believes that if doctors probed the motivations of many young people who present with gender confusion, they would discover external factors are sometimes heavily at play. His warnings can't be ignored when he says, quote, "I think there's a massive population of people who actually don't have gender dysphoria, who are now either being pushed toward it or themselves being drawn towards this gender affirmative care pathway," unquote. Disturbingly, he says, it has infiltrated the culture. It comes from doctors, comes from the school curriculum, comes from the media, it comes from social media, it comes from the peak LGBTQIA plus organisations and the marketing that they put out. It's everywhere, telling you if you don't feel like you fit the stereotype, you might be trans. For me, he said, it felt like I'd pretty much been involved in a cult, unquote. Ollie Davies has performed a significant public service in alerting parents and teenagers. Is it a message, though, that society is prepared to heed?